Now we have a fireside chat by Badri Narayanan, Executive Partner, Lakshmikumaran and Sridharan, LNS, and Sanjay Gupta, EVP and Head Legal, Jubilant, Ingrevia Limited. This session will be moderated by Mannu, Arora, journalist, ETCFO. Over to you, Mannu.
Hello friends, welcome to another session at ET Legal Leadership Conclave 2022. This is a fireside chat on how a general counsel can be a partner to the business, governance and operations. Well, in this fireside chat, we are joined by two eminent panelists, Mr. Badri Narayanan. He is executive partner at Lakshmikumaran and Sridharan. It's the country's topmost renowned law firm. We are also joined by Mr. Sanjay Gupta, who is head legal at Jubilant Ingrevia. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, without much ado, gentlemen, we would like to start this discussion by asking you on the role of the general counsel first. So, Mr. Gupta, could you start this conversation by your assessment of how the role has sort of progressed in the last couple of decades?
So, if you look at the role of the GC, it's become multi-dimensional. Now, no longer the expectation of the management or the business heads or the business is that, okay, here is somebody who will provide you contracts and help you with litigations and issues. Now, it's more about partnering, it's more about predicting, it's more proactive. So the GC also has to work in tune with the business, with the leadership, and preempt issues, predict issues, and prepare the organization or help participate in that preparation to ensure that there are least issues, and if there are issues, then they are handled in time and in context and across geographies, of course. Nowadays, geography plays a very important role. You can't be in a silo. Your business aspiration is always expanding. Your business wants to grow in multiple countries. So that's the role of the GC now, to see that, yes, whenever they decide to go into a new area, you are ready.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, for your comprehensive view on the role of the GC. Let me quickly come to Mr. Narayanan for his initial reading of the role of the General Counsel. Yeah, Mr. Narayanan.
Thanks, Manu. And like Sanjay ji said, the role of the GC has become very complex today. So earlier, the general counsels used to be someone who used to be a conduit between the law firm and the promoter or the business or the CFO. And they used to manage specific transactions. But now the GC's role, like Sanjay has said, has evolved to being someone who is going to actively be part of the decision making of the business. And at the same time, managing law firms so that they are getting the optimum kind of advice from a risk-based assessment from a business perspective. So I think, so in my own evolution, earlier the question that I used to get from general counsels used to be very particular. Now I can see that they are literally playing the role. They're taking the advice that we give. They're processing that advice to see what is possible, what is not possible, and then being able to inform the business, yes, you can go ahead with this or you cannot go ahead with this. It's a very, very complicated role. You may think it's a very simple role, but in today's context, okay, it's such a dynamic situation and world that we live in. The general counsel's role has really become a very important and a very central role in the running of the business. And that's, I think, where the role has evolved over the last few years. And coupled the fact that today, I think general counsels have very sophisticated teams internally. Okay, it's not just that. So you find that there is a lot of work and that the general counsel needs to put in. It's almost like running a business P&L and running a law firm internally. So I think the general counsel's role definitely has evolved and is much more complex and much more central to the decision making that a company has to go forward from. Those are, I thought, some points from my side relating to how the GC has evolved over the last couple of decades.
Okay, that is a very holistic perspective, Badri, you given. Mr. Gupta, I quickly want to come to you now, and ask you your view on the overall regulatory atmosphere today. Mr. Narayanan said it's the role has now become from a conduit to the business and managing law firm. Now it's not a conduit, and now you have to take a decision. It's that way for the general counsels. But in the increased regulatory framework, if I were to ask you, how easy or difficult is it to make a decision?
I'll react on this in two ways. Actually, there's no increased regulatory framework. The regulations, in fact, have increased because there are new areas. You have privacy, you have social media, you have so many different aspects of business which have evolved. You have e-commerce. Therefore, regulations have increased. But if you look at the pure regulations, they are the same ones. We have the same Contract Act. We have the same framework of there will be a drug regulator, there will be a food regulator, there is a body which regulates chemicals. So all these regulations have been there for ages. But what has changed in these regulatory or current regulatory environment is that the regulators have kind of connected with each other. So what has happened is earlier a company law regulator may not have a linkage to the trademark regulator. The trademark regulator did not have linkage to the drug regulator. Now, in a simple registration of a drug, now all three have a role to play, and they all kind of give their voice to a simple transaction. So when we were registering, say, Remdesivir, which is the drug all of you must be aware because of the recent COVID-19 experience. So you have to register the drug not only in the country. You have to register the drug, bring the data of regulatory requirements in other jurisdictions also. And if there are issues which one jurisdiction has highlighted, those have to be highlighted in the other regulatory domain also. And then you have to also look at the trademark under which the drug will be sold. So again, the trademark regulator comes into play. Then whatever are these changes, so earlier a regulator would give you a relaxation in a particular area that, okay, for example, again taking the example of drugs, I required data for 3 years. A different regulator used to ask, say, I require data for 2 years. Now, almost every regulator will tune with each other and they'll say, okay, let's ask data for 3 years or 2 years. So it's not like they will have so varied requirements. It's becoming very similar. So as a GC, it eases my role because yes, the regulatory environment is kind of syncing with each other. But at the same time, it's also become too synced, meaning for comfort from a business point of view. So if there is an issue in Kazakhstan, or will it have a bearing vis-a-vis my issue or vis-a-vis the regulator I have to abide by in, say, Australia? Yes, there is a chance there will be a cross-border assessment that, okay, what happened to Kazakhstan? So my Australian regulator may ask me what happened in Kazakhstan. I'll have to inform them. And that's not that, okay, it's happening outside of India. Even my Indian regulator will ask me what happened there, what happened here. I am hearing this. Why don't you inform me and give me data about that issue? So that aspect is something which is both good and at the same time both cumbersome.
Okay, which is both good and both cumbersome. Badri, would you share the same view that the regulatory framework per se is most synchronized among regulators, and it's wrong to say that the regulations has per se increased, and also the comfort part? Yeah.
Yeah, I think like Sanjay said very nicely, I think there are two parts he said, very, very interesting. One is the syncing among the regulators, which I think it's really a nightmare for the in-house counsel. It's not that much for the law firm because we only have to advise on a regulation for a jurisdiction. But somebody who's inside, who's effectively not only a general counsel for one jurisdiction, but for somebody who's international in nature, you really have to make sure that all the moving parts are taken care of. But I think what other thing he very nicely mentioned is that it's not that there are less or more regulations. There are new areas of regulations now. So, for example, data privacy is suddenly becoming very, very big, right? So, for example, social media management is suddenly becoming very, very big. And I'd love to hear Sanjay's thoughts on some of this because he's seeing this on a real basis, and it can really have an impact, for example, on the stock market price or value of the shares which are there. But I think very interestingly, what we're seeing is that the new regulations are very complex because they're trying to regulate something which is evolving, say something like in the data privacy area or social media area, or even in drugs and cosmetics, or for example, in labeling and food area and areas like that, where you want to kind of balance the welfare as also allow for the freedom. And many times I find that we are not only just putting the regulation out, but we are modifying it also. That is, the first version of a regulation nowadays, according to me, is not the final version. Okay, so the regulations are in constant evolution. So, for example, take the RBI, for example, the number of amendments they bring in every year, okay, new notifications to plug the regulations is a lot. Similarly, Companies Act has undergone so many changes. It's trying to keep up with it. Data privacy, we've had 2 rounds of bills being presented before the parliament, not being passed. Okay, but every time the business has to get ready for what could potentially be the bill at that point of time. So I think there's a lot more of these new laws and new regulations, which what I feel is like they are born with not as a fully grown, fully developed kind of a law, but something which is going to evolve as the time goes on. And I think that's something which is really challenging for this thing. So coupled to the fact that you have to sync up this data and regulators across multiple jurisdictions, I think you also have newer regulations which are a lot more in evolutionary phase rather than in a mature phase. And I think those are challenges which Sanjay ji has to face, and probably he's looking at. And like I said, I don't envy his position on those at all. And very nice to be the outsider and advice. But like I said, it's a complex environment in which we live.
Well, I'll quickly pick from you, Badri, and Mr. Gupta. What do you think of these newer regulations which are in the evolving phase? Like Badri mentioned of the social media or data privacy, which is still, being finalized. How does the GC navigate this partnering, so to say, when the regulation per se is evolving? Yeah.
So each area, as we mentioned, whether it is privacy or social media related issues, these are 2 different dimensions, meaning it's not like in a same brush I can say that we navigate on a particular proposed regulation in the same way. So privacy, for example, some regulations or some areas are where we are catching up or India is catching up. So therefore, we have learnings available on privacy from US, from Europe, and therefore we try to, it makes my task easier. But social media is something which is hitting everybody on the same time zone. So therefore, I don't have learnings from my experiences across geographies, and everybody is learning at the same time. So therefore, that makes my task much more difficult. So privacy, we know that yes, Badri rightly mentioned that last 4 years we've had 2 sets of bills for various reasons. None of them have seen the light of the day, but we have only seen the drafts of the day. So we are still working on expecting that, okay, whether India will follow the European model or whether India will follow the US model or a mix of that like we always do. And therefore, we try to, okay, if that happens or if this happens or if this is the regulation, this is how I will comply. But social media, very difficult. And also, like we always talk of media trial, and therefore social media trial becomes a very important problem for me, which I need to address. We have consumers who post, we have partners or customers who post on social media, airing their grievances, and it kinds of comes out that, okay, all mistake is that of the business or the company, and everything else or whatever the customer did or whatever the consumer did is sacrosanct, and we are the ones who wronged them, and we are the ones who need to rectify it. So those challenges are much more, meaning we face trial in media on an issue, and I am not talking of a media trial in that sense of reputation and all. Even if I talk legally, so if a customer did not get the pizza on time, and if he complains or says that, look, I had a bad experience with our products, then what happens to the court? What happens? Where is their jurisdictional, how the fairness, unbiasedness of a court which will look into these issues and then decide, where does that go? So that challenge of something being dealt with or analyzed, or me being found to be wrong, or me being perceived to be wrong, that challenge is very scary, and I don't think anybody has an answer to that. We've consulted experts like Badri and all, but even they don't have an answer to this, because it's a challenge which everybody is facing all across geographies. It's not just that, okay, in India we are facing it, everywhere we are facing it. And so that's something which is new and challenging.
Okay, you put it as like a scariest situation or a challenge for a GC. Badri, what do you think? I mean, do you really don't have an answer to give to GC, or like how do you decide on the answer?
The best part about this, Sanjay already answered for me. Okay, like I said, we are as clueless. I think again there are some real interesting learnings from this. One, like I said, today I think social media is probably the number one advertising channel for companies. It used to be for many years it used to be TV and others, but today social media is such an important part of the communication of this thing. The only problem is that you get an immediate feedback back from the people on social media, and some of that can go viral. Okay, and like I said, it's very, very tough to figure out where you need to file a case, or whether there's any follow-up of the case, okay, how to kind of do that. So a lot of it is actually now moving from the court systems to kind of having these conversations with social media companies and kind of building a kind of a uniform policy, okay, having a clear answer when something of this nature is posted. Okay, you cannot say you're wrong on social media, because that makes it even worse, because that's exactly what some of the people want. We've had some curious cases where General Counsel has called us and said, so and so has been posted against us, what can we do? Karke. And then we start our investigation. So we have an investigation team looking at it, only to find that the transaction itself never happened, and somebody is posted thinking it is this company. Okay, so that a lot of it is happening. Okay, so you think Pizza Hut, for example, I'm not giving any nonsense, Pizza Hut is Jubilant, and then you don't get a Pizza Hut delivery on time, you blast Jubilant saying that your pizza did not come on time. So it could be as simple as that. And we've seen in more complex situations, something of this nature happening. Similarly, in social media, we also find that people are changing the words to make it sound similar to the products being sold by companies, and then you're having people thinking that that the person who has sold or the company which has sold is the original company. Okay, and then there is all sorts of issues. So I think social media management, okay, is becoming extremely complex. Okay, it's becoming like a hydra moving in different directions. Okay, business is very excited about social media because it's able to connect directly with consumers like you've never been able to do. But for the general counsel and lawyers, because we only get involved when there is a dispute or when there's something going wrong or there is a crisis. So at that point of time, what are the ways in which we can manage is something which becomes extremely challenging. And maybe Sanjay, you can give some practical things that you put in place for handling some of these things. I think that there are very few legal answers as we speak, but maybe some things that you could share with us, some of the practical things that you do to kind of manage this.
There are few things which everybody would be doing, I presume, but we are certainly doing is partnering with our corporate affairs team, because they handle media, they handle so many things. They are able to kind of give us summaries, crunch data, do a deep dive, and are able to help us fathom all the reactions and the width and breadth of the issue. Then the next kind of thing which one needs to do also is that, look, at the main focus has to be continuity of business. One bad does not mean that everything is bad, or one issue does not mean that, okay, we are kind of have to give a full stop to what we are doing, correct the issue, and then move on. No, we are in that 24/7 mode as a business. So even a reaction has to be that, okay, I have to look at what's also going well for me. So it's not just that, okay, just because I can't let my guard down. So we have to continue with what's going well as trying to see, okay, what we need to do about what is this particular issue about. So I would say those are few aspects of it which is important. But there is no rocket science here. It's like the way, the art of it rather than the science of it.
No rocket science, but very comprehensive, practical sort of measures that you just sort of narrated, Mr. Gupta. So, Mr. Gupta, just quickly picking from here on and talking about another aspect which is very important for the GCs is that's governance. You have already 3 decades of experience as legal. So I want to understand from you first the role of the GC in the light of the governance, and second, in the governance framework, how is the ESG impacting the governance bit for GCs? Yeah.
See, environment sustainability has become a kind of, I don't think it's become important. It was always important, but it was that we have now brought focus to this area. And when you bring focus to a particular issue, then ability to handle that issue, collectively overcome that issue becomes stronger, and your so that's what's changed. So it's not that environment wasn't important earlier. It's not that governance wasn't important earlier. It was always important, and it will always be important. It's just that the whole world has started focusing on governance. The world focuses that, look, I want to partner with somebody. I want to engage with somebody. So when my customer wants to engage with me, they want to engage with me not only because I'm making a good product or I'm offering a good service, but also I'm socially responsible. I'm I'm following the principles of ESG. I'm not shirking away my responsibilities as an organization on these aspects, and therefore they want an extra level of effort by the supplier, in this case me, to follow these principles, because those principles have kind of been found. Yes, why should I, as a governance, only be concentrating that, okay, if I have done good financial accounting, then yes, I have done my job. No, now that's like taken as a given. So they want to know that, okay, look, are we having enough checks and balances? Are there independent directors available who have an independent view, who are not conflicted? Are we able to have processes which will take care of conflict of interest? And as Badri mentioned or alluded to briefly in terms of insider trading, stock market. So all of these kind of practices, which earlier we used to put in the domain of ethics, has now kind of brought into the bigger framework of governance. And all of that, again, is cross-border governance. So it's not that, okay, I'm doing a good job in India, I'm an Indian MNC, so therefore I've done my duty because I have met the law of the land, which is the Indian law. No, nowadays customers expect, business partners expect that wherever I am doing operations, wherever I am doing business, everywhere I'll have a governance model which will ensure that yes, I am complying with the law of that land as well, not just the law of the land where I am based. So that's the change which has happened. And then some of the changes which have come about is with the changing times, like work from home. Now, how do you ensure that our employees are not lighting, our employees are devoting full time to their, so those aspects come from the social part of the ESG. That you have to take care of the employees, harassment and should be avoided, and it's not just normal harassment, sexual harassment, all kinds of harassments need to be taken care of by the organization. And as a GC, then again the role gets complicated because there are varying definitions, varying mechanisms prescribed under different geographies. So in US, there is a different mechanism. We don't have like what you may hear in India as a POSH Act or the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. In US, they have their own law. So when you, for a global organization, I'm supposed to, in India, have a POSH committee or the a specific committee with external presence or external experts presence to handle such issues. But then when I go to Europe or when I go to US, that concept is not there. They have a different concept. So that aspect of ESG becomes very complicated in a global organization. But nonetheless, it is an important thing.
Badri, you have something to add here?
I think Sanjay has been very, very comprehensive. I think, like I said, e-governance and especially ESG now will become central to this thing. I'm going to complete only just make one short point. I think governance should be part of a company right from the start. It's not something that you suddenly grow up and become governance oriented. And we're seeing that with a lot of the startups where, they suddenly become a unicorn and then governance is an issue. Okay. Investors today, we all know what you're talking about. Investors today look for governance or should look for governance much earlier. Okay. And putting those things in place is going to be important. And it's a little bit hard for the younger companies on governance because they come up with kind of breaking the social and the business paradigm, right? So thought process to be disruptive and then to be also be governance oriented gets a bit complicated. But I think that's something which needs to be taken into account. And I think a good counsel, both external or outside counsel, as some of us are referred to, though we don't like, we're saying really we're partners in crime. So some of the things that I think is important is to kind of have that as part of, and I think it's something that needs to be spoken about on a constant basis in order to get there. It's not a one-time activity. It's something which is there. And I think coupled with the fact that, today I think companies and business have to be sustainable. They have to take measures to be able to operate in that framework. I think it's very, very important. I think all the points that Sanjay has mentioned are on the point on that.
Mr. Gupta, allow me to quickly again touch one important theme, which is of globalization for the GCs. One important thing today is the geopolitical risk that exists in the world, and we all know about the Ukraine-Russia crisis, so to say. So quickly wanting to know your perspective for the GCs, what typically, how should they basically go about the geopolitical tensions, and per se, if we were to just, also gauge the implications of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Yeah.
Such issues, it's not again, I would say, have happened for the first time. So we had Iran, we had prior to that, we had the Gulf War. Meaning, it's so what happens uniformly when such issues erupt, and we look at how such issue disrupts business. Mm-hmm. So from our point of view, keeping aside the political aspects, keeping aside humanitarian aspects, all of those are important. But the issue which we have to evaluate, or how we have to assess an issue, is what is the impact on business. And to evaluate impact on business, traditional impacts used to be that there will be a sanction. So you cannot export goods to that country, or to certain individuals or entities in that country. But that has changed a bit. What has also changed now, or because why it is being done now in a different way, is that just by restricting sale of goods or preventing sale of goods, not much impact was being seen to have happened. So they'll go into the financial system. So if you see now in this Ukraine crisis also, there are certain banks which have been debarred from SWIFT, and SWIFT is your international mechanism of payments. So if I need to receive money for goods validly exported, say to the region concerned, then I am entitled to pay payment. But then if SWIFT is not there as a system, then how do I get my payment? So that kind of a context, or that kind of an issue, impacts us. And how do you plan for it? Meaning, that's also the other issue. Meaning, nobody can predict how long this crisis will last. Meaning, it could be that as we are speaking, there may be a ceasefire and hands are shaken, or whatever is done to kind of signify, or it could be that another month it can go on. So there is no way to predict. There is no business mathematical model or a statistical model to know that when will it stop. So that uncertainty makes it challenging enough that each transaction has to be evaluated. Like, even if I've exported something today, when my company wants to export it tomorrow, I will have to reevaluate everything at tomorrow's date.
So thanks for your holistic view, Mr. Gupta. But before I jump to Badri, a quick question on the investigations front. These are getting wider, in the light of globalization today. So if you could just quickly tell us how the GCs should approach laws. Yeah.
So, see, in investigation, the key factor is procedure. You have to follow the procedure which is prescribed. The investigator at times will try to extrapolate. So if they think that you, or if they allege that you've done one wrong, they'll say, they extrapolate and will say that you've done 100 wrongs, rather than limiting themselves. and that is very worrisome. So there is a presumption, whereas we all know under law, until proven guilty, you are not guilty. But the investigator nowadays goes with the presumption that you are guilty. Just because they've identified a particular issue or a non-compliance as they think, they will think that everything you've been doing in the past or are doing today or you will do in future is fraught with that problem, but which is not normally the case. So that overreach by the investigator is the most worrisome part for me in most investigations.
Okay, Badri, quick comments on both the investigation front as well as governance. Yes.
No problem. So on sanctions, like what Sanjay said, I think it's a minefield today. We've all grown up thinking of sanctions as being something based on trade and commerce. Okay, but now, as he said, it's moved to the financial, and there's also soft pressure with respect to how to handle exits from countries where there is a real problem. So, and again, there's a social media piece where it becomes even more highlighting in terms of whether your consumers are wanting you to leave a country and all of those issues. So sanctions are becoming very, very complicated, and different countries have different types of sanctions. I think that's something that we have to kind of be wary of and manage that. I feel that post these crises, there could be a lot of legal challenges that will happen between the countries, between companies. There are bilateral investment treaties. There could be issues from that perspective. And I just feel that there'll be a lot of arbitrations. There'll be a lot of litigation which will come out of this. Okay, so because consciously there are contracts being breached, and consciously there is a push to breach contracts also. So I think those are going to be some very interesting legal developments will happen over the next few years. Coming to investigation, I think it's something which is at the top of the minds of the board of directors, the general counsels, the CEO today. Okay, and I think one of the things that I always emphasize is that investigations are unpredictable, but training for investigations is predictable. Okay, so doing trainings, getting your stakeholders, like what Sanjay said, being aware of the procedure the investigator will follow, and having your internal SOPs, okay, to make sure that when investigation happens, you're able to handle that seamlessly and well. Getting your stakeholders ready for different types of investigation, just like we do mock fire drills, doing these mock investigation training makes a huge difference. The companies that consistently do that, I think, come out well.
Okay, great. So allow me to, in fact, have your concluding remarks. But Mr. Gupta, in your concluding remarks, I would also like to just quickly tell our audience that how the law firms can specifically, help in excelling the in-house teams and the GCs per se, and what sort of services are you expecting from them to basically enhance their offering? Yeah.
Earlier, mostly or we used to have litigation or issue-based kind of consulting with the law firms, but it's now evolving over to a preventive, and as Badri mentioned, trainings on issues which are complex, so that we are ready when the issue comes, rather than we will face the issue when the issue comes. So, or we are ready. We'll give you a solution once the issue erupts, versus we are here to help you prevent an issue from erupting. So I think that's the change which has happened with the law firms, and that's where they bring the value addition. And the other change is that, see, all law firms, there are so many of them, and all are doing good work. So each of them is specializing in a or few fields, and that's where I think aspirationally all of them want to be the experts in all fields, and I don't think that's possible for me. One of the way we define GC is we are a generalist, and same way I feel one thing which I would suggest or request the law firms is don't aspire, meaning you can aspire, but don't think that one shouldn't think that okay, you are experts in all the fields, and let the GC also go to the expert and not feel bad that okay, Sanjay, you didn't come to us for this particular issue. Why is so many? I'll kind of end on that kind of a reaction.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for your concluding remarks. Badri, if I quickly, ask you your law firm's perspective. I mean, your perspective on the role of the GCs going forward. Everything. How they can be a better partner, governance, business, everywhere.
We are always trying to be a better partner for the general counsel, and like I said, we aspire to be an expert in every area. But I think the one of the key things is that I think having very well-defined areas that you can support general counsels is very important. And I think more and more like issue-based, particular work-based items are getting commoditized and are moving. And I think there's and a lot of that is moving in-house. So I always get worried that sometimes the companies have a bigger law firm inside their company than we have outside. So I think for us it's a real challenge. I think it's important for us to keep upskilling to be able to add newer areas which can be of importance and work for general counsels. Like I said, I agree with Sanjay. I think we cannot do everything. But where I think the mindset, at least with some of us, is changing is to be more proactive rather than reactive. Okay, is to be able to say, hey, is there something that I can come and help you? And other projects that we could work to make everything be preventive rather than kind of reacting, and then when something comes, we'll wait for a call from Sanjay or someone to do that. I think that's one of the shift I think over the next 5 years you will see law firms doing. And like I said, having people as specialists in different domains and building it over time is I think the way the general counsels look at it. Like I said, it's no way I can be better than a general counsel when it comes to his business, right? So I think the only place that I can do is support him in making the right decisions for the business, and for that I need to be an expert and have expertise, and that's what is really appreciated, I think, by everyone. So I think those are the concluding remarks from my side on this issue.
Okay, that's very comprehensive, Badri. I must say that you've covered all. And thank you so much, gentlemen, again for your magnificent insights. I know lawyers would want to speak at length, especially you guys for sure. But I have to pause you here. Thank you so much again to you and for our audience for watching this session. Audience, please stay tuned for more sessions at ET Legal Leadership Conclave 2022. That's it from us.
Thank you everyone for such an engaging and insightful discussion. Now we'll take a short break. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen.